Crocus the marmot. Up in the mountains, just below where the snow remains all year round, a little marmot named Crocus was born. He was the last of the litter to be born. His siblings were already feeding on their mother's milk when little Crocus finally arrived. He was the smallest of the whole family. Gentiana, Myosotis, and Daisy were a year older, but Primrose and Edelweiss were not even an hour older, and yet they too were bigger than him. In the first days of their lives, Crocus, Primrose, and Edelweiss stayed in the burrow huddled together with Mum, while the rest of the family were out looking for food. The burrow was nice, warm, dark, and smelling of hay. In time, Mum started to go out to eat as well, but she would come back regularly to feed them, smelling of fresh grass and sunny meadows. They would drink milk, and Mum would cuddle them and talk to them about what things were like up there outside the burrow. As they stayed alone while Mum was feeding, they started to explore the burrow, stumbling around in the hay. Their eyes were opening, and they could see a soft light flowing in from the tunnels going up. Every day they explored a little more of the burrow. Little Crocus was a bit slower than his siblings and was always trailing behind. When they went together to explore some of the tunnels going up, Crocus always arrived after Primrose and Edelweiss. At the top of the tunnels, they would reach the entrance of the burrow where the light came in. They would play, run from one entrance to another, stumbling and rolling in the soft hay. Crocus, who was always lagging behind, would sometimes crash on top of Primrose and Edelweiss, who had suddenly stopped for a clumsy play fight. They loved staying inside the burrow and play all day, but as the weeks went by, they started to become more curious about the outside. They would go to an entrance and pop their little heads through, catch a few sun rays, and watch their older siblings play in the grass and feed with their parents. Primrose and Edelweiss soon became eager to go and explore the outside. Crocus was not quite so sure. He was still small compared to them, maybe because he was late for his meals most of the time. From the safety of the burrow, he watched as Primrose and Edelweiss took their first steps on the bright green grass and pushed each other around on the soft slopes outside the burrow. And after a few days of observing them, he finally took his first steps onto the grass. It was a lot like the hay in the burrow, only smoother. There were many colors around, flowers, grass, and sky. Inside the burrow, everything was mainly different shades of brown, but outside, everything was so bright and colorful. Gentiana, one of his older sisters, stayed next to him when he went out for the first time. She hugged him when he needed comfort. She explained how he needed to stay close to the burrow and dive back if he heard the alarm whistle. With time, he became bolder. He ran after Primrose, stumbled with Edelweiss, and had his first taste of leaves and grass. But when Crocus was running around in the grass, eating flowers and playing with his siblings, he was always trailing behind them, just as he had trailed behind them inside the burrow. And so, a little after his siblings, he discovered the flower patch behind the rock that faces the rising sun. And a little after his siblings, he found the stream that was running just above the burrow. And a little after his siblings, he came across the pile of rocks that were perfect for climbing just near the lower entrance. And in the evening, when it was time to go back to the burrow for the night, he always showed up after everyone was already snuggled together. And each time someone whistled, warning of a danger, everyone ran back to the burrow, and Crocus would always get there last. "You need to catch up, Crocus," said his mother. "Crocus, don't be so late all the time," said his father. They were worried about him, and so they did not allow him to wander too far from the burrow like his siblings could. They needed to make sure that if a fox or an eagle attacked, he could make it back to the safety of the barrel in time. But Crocus didn't mind staying closer to the barrel. There was still plenty to do for a young marmot. He would wake up in the morning a bit later than the rest of the family, and go out to graze and play, pass by the river and look at the insects on the flowers. Besides, there was always someone close to play, groom, or nap with at the other hour of the day. And in the evening, while everyone went down the barrel to rest for the night, Crocus liked to watch the sunset and see how the warm colors filled the sky. Then he would join the rest of the family asleep in the hay. Day by day, Crocus and his siblings were getting bigger and stronger, although Crocus was still a little bit smaller and weaker and slower than the rest. Meanwhile, the days were beginning to get shorter, and everyone started to go to bed a little earlier every night. The heat of the sun was getting softer too, and the morning started to become chilly. All the marmots, even the little one, started to spend more time eating and less time playing. Crocus was eating more too, but he would still spend time going to the river to watch the water slide down the mountain, or to watch the sunset light up the clouds. Around that time, Mom and Dad started to gather grass and bring it into the burrow, and soon enough, the older siblings, Gentiana, Myosotis, and Daisy, joined them. The younger one followed, clumsily imitating their brothers and sisters. They were not the most efficient, dropping grass all along the way or leaving it on the ground so that they could push each other and play. But little by little, the burrow was filled with fresh hay and became warm and cozy and smelling lovely. Eventually, the weather started to change as well. Some days brought rain, others even a little bit of snow. Everyone started to spend more and more time inside the burrow and were becoming sleepier. But Crocus was more hungry than he was sleepy. He was not as big as Primrose and Edelweiss, so he spent more time outside, digging in the snow to eat the grass hidden underneath, and looking at the mountains covered with white fluffy blankets. He would still take time to go to the river. It was starting to freeze, and frost made everything look shiny. One morning, it had been already a few days that Crocus was the only one venturing out of the burrow. He found that the clouds had been replaced by a warm and gentle sun. He enjoyed eating the grass without having to dig through the snow. He even enjoyed a nap in the sun around noon. The day was so nice. He went up to the river. He could hear it running more freely. With the warmth, the ice was melting and the river was happily running and singing. Crocus sat next to the stream, ate some grass growing there, and dozed off for a few minutes. He was suddenly awoken by a loud sound and a splash of cold water. He looked around him, scared and wet, and saw a massive rock that had just fallen into the stream. "Oh, that was really close," he thought, glad that he wasn't underneath when it fell. "The melting ice must have left it loose," he thought. He looked at the rock sitting in the stream. The water was pulling around it upstream. Everything was quiet again. Crocus took a few steps away from the border of the stream as the water was rising. The rock was covering the entire width of the stream, blocking the water. He looked back. He could see the burrow downhill. The sun was starting to go down. And suddenly his stomach dropped. He looked again at the rising water and back at the burrow just downhill from where he stood. If the water reached the edge, it would run down straight towards the burrow. His whole family was in danger, and they were all asleep, already entering the long winter sleep. He had to do something, quick, before the water reached the edge of its bed, then it would be too late. "If I could dig a new path for the water," he thought, "the stream would follow it and go back to its bed instead of going down towards the burrow." He started digging with all the strength of his little hands. But Crocus was very small, and the task was very big, even for an adult marmot. Plus, He had to do it very fast before the water reached the border of the stream bed. Crocus could not do it on his own, and everyone was asleep. He had to wake them up. He ran towards the burrow as fast as he could and dove into the burrow, rolling down the tunnel. As soon as he landed somewhere stable, he took his breath for a few seconds, then filled his little lungs with as much air as possible, and let out the loudest whistle his little body was capable of producing. It resonated through the chambers of the burrow, and soon he saw marmot heads popping out of the hay, confused, angry, and surprised. "Come with me!" he shouted, "quickly!" and he went back out as fast as he had come in, running back to the river bed. He immediately started to dig again. The water was getting dangerously close to the edge. Little by little, his brothers and sisters, his mother and his father arrived. Some more sleepy than others. Seeing the urgency of the situation, they quickly joined Crocus in his task, each of them digging and digging, making a groove for the stream to run into. And just seconds before the water reached the edge of its bed, they were done. They all watched anxious as the water started to overflow and slowly made its way down the path they had dug. They held their breath as the water slowly curved around the blocked part and came back to its natural track. The water kept flowing slowly through the groove they made for it, and after making sure it was big enough for all the water to flow that way, they started to head back to the burrow. They thanked Crocus for saving their home from a catastrophic flood. Maybe it is not always bad to be a little late, Crocus thought to himself. Had he been on time for hibernation, he would not have been able to save his family. By the time they finished, the stars were already lighting the sky in between the clouds, and the temperature had dropped. As they glanced toward the river, they saw a few snowflakes slowly falling from the sky. Summer was over, and the burrow was safe. They all went down the tunnels into the warm burrow and dove into the sweet-smelling hay. There, huddled together, while the snow was slowly putting a white blanket over the mountain, they fell asleep, happy and safe for the long month of winter, knowing that when they wake up, spring would be covering the mountain with colors again.